Two yellow eyes stood motionless in the darkness. They did not blink. They did not waver. The leopard was lying on a low branch, less than 3 meters above the ground, its entire body pressed flat against the bark. A streak of yellow and black spots almost completely dissolving into the darkness beneath the Virunga canopy. It did not move. It did not need to move. Its prey was sitting directly below, motionless, and had been motionless for days. A silverback gorilla, old, alone. Sitting beneath the tree, his back against the decaying trunk, both hands hanging loosely over his knees. His silver fur was soaked with rainwater. His eyes were open, but they were not looking at anything, only down at the ground. The kind of stare of a living creature that had stopped caring whether it lived or not. The leopard breathed in the air. The scent of old blood from the wound on the gorilla's shoulder was still there, faint, but enough to confirm what it had been assessing for the past 3 nights. This gorilla was growing weaker, a little weaker each day. Each night, the leopard moved a little closer. The first night, 50 meters. The second night, 30 meters. Tonight, 15 meters. It only needed to wait another night or 2. But the leopard did not know that someone was watching them both. Through infrared binoculars from a tent set up 50 meters away, with a racing heart and a notebook that had already filled 3 pages tonight. That person was me. The gorilla's name was Kato. I had been tracking him for 7 years, and 4 weeks earlier, I had watched him lose everything. That morning, the Virunga forest was buried in fog so thick that I could not see more than 10 steps ahead. I had been climbing since before dawn, my boots sinking deep into the red mud, one hand gripping tree roots to pull myself upward. 7 years working here, and every morning this forest still found a way to remind me that human beings did not belong in this place. I was looking for Kato. Kato was a 38-year-old silverback gorilla. I had tracked him for 7 years, from the time he was still the unchallenged leader of a troop of 12. For 15 straight years, Kato had led the troop through every season, knowing every slope, every stream bed, every fruiting bush across a territory of more than 20 square kilometers. But 4 weeks earlier, everything had ended. A young silverback named Bosco, 14 years old, nearly 20 kilograms heavier than Kato, had challenged Kato and defeated him in less than 3 minutes. I witnessed the entire thing through binoculars. Bosco knocked Kato down, bit into his shoulder, and pinned him there until Kato stopped resisting. When the fight was over, Kato got back to his feet, did not look back, and walked into the forest alone. Not a single gorilla followed him. That was the law. Brutal, but still the law. The GPS signal told me that Kato had barely moved for 4 days. The same coordinates, with a margin of error of less than 10 meters. I found him at 7 in the morning, sitting beneath a hagania tree, his back against the trunk, both arms hanging limp. Last night's rain was still dripping from the canopy onto his soaked silver fur. Kato did not look up as I came closer. His eyes were open, but they were fixed on the ground, the kind of stare anyone who studies primates recognizes immediately. It was not rest. It was surrender. Forest leaves lay thick around the place where he sat. He had not stood up for at least 2 days. His droppings were very little and dry, He had eaten almost nothing. A silverback gorilla losing his troop is like a general losing his army. Every instinct, every purpose in his life is built around protecting and leading. When there is no one left to protect, that machine slowly shuts down. I had seen this in other silverbacks. They did not die of hunger or disease. They died because they no longer had a reason. But what worried me more was what I had found the previous morning. Leopard tracks clearly imprinted in the mud, less than 30 meters from Kato. 3 days in a row, each day closer than the last. The leopard was assessing him, patiently waiting for the right moment. That night, at around 2 in the morning, a low growl rose from the west. I switched on my flashlight. 2 yellow points flashed, then vanished. Kato did not react. In the past, the slightest rustle of leaves would have made him stand up and beat his chest. Now he sat motionless, as if there was nothing left worth reacting to. On the 32nd day, the GPS signal from the old troop showed that they were moving east, now only about 2 kilometers from Kato. But then I noticed something unusual. One signal had separated from the main group and was moving in a different direction. Amara's signal. Amara was a 7-year-old female gorilla whom Kato had protected since birth. When she was young, Amara had a habit of sitting beside Kato every afternoon, picking dry leaves from his back, a social grooming behavior gorillas use to strengthen bonds. I looked through my binoculars and saw Amara emerge from behind a bamboo thicket, and clinging tightly to her back with all 4 limbs was a baby gorilla less than 3 months old. Amara had given birth, and instead of staying with Bosco, she had chosen to leave. I knew why. After taking power, Bosco had shown aggressive behavior toward infants that were not his own, shoving them, growling, and nearly biting a 4-month-old. New silverbacks sometimes kill the infants of the former silverback to force the females back into estrus. Amara, driven by her instinct to protect her baby, had decided to leave the troop. That afternoon, Amara moved closer to Kato. She gave a short, low rumble, the sound gorillas use when approaching a familiar individual. Kato did not react, still sitting motionless and staring at the ground. Amara sat down right beside him and began picking leaves from Kato's back, exactly the same behavior she had done for years. The infant wriggled, reaching out a tiny hand to touch his silver fur. 1 minute. 2 minutes. 5 minutes. Kato remained motionless. Then, very slowly, he tilted his head to the side. His eyes settled on the infant. The baby crawled from Amara's back onto Kato's lap, gripping the fur on his arm tightly. Kato did not push it away. For the first time in 32 days, his hand moved, placing his massive palm on the infant's back. Not holding it, not pulling it closer, just resting his hand there, as if he needed to make sure that what he was feeling was real. At around 2 in the morning, I was awakened by growling. But this time, it was not coming from one direction. It was coming from 2, from the west and from the north. 2 leopards. My heart seized in my chest. 1 leopard was already dangerous. 2, whether a mating pair during breeding season or a mother and offspring hunting together, was a nightmare. A healthy young silverback would have been too great a risk for two leopards to take on. But Kato, old, exhausted, 4 weeks without eating, they judged him to be prey within reach. I swept my flashlight across the darkness. To the west, 2 yellow eyes, very close. To the north, another 2, circling around to the right. They were closing in like pincers, one holding the front while the other moved behind. Coordinated tactics. Amara let out a panicked call, the sharp scream female gorillas use when they sense immediate danger. She clutched her infant tightly to her chest and backed up against the base of the tree. Then I heard it, chest beating, slow at first. Then faster, harder, more relentless. Kato stood up. For the first time in more than a month, he rose to his full height, 1.75 meters, both fists clenched and pounding against his chest again and again. The sound echoed through the forest canopy like war drums. Hoarser than before, shakier than before, but still the chest beat of a silverback. The leopard to the west struck first. It launched out of the darkness, a streak of yellow and black spots ripping through the air. Kato turned and swung his right arm. His hand, weighing more than 4 kilograms, slammed into the leopard's ribs in midair. The leopard was knocked sideways, rolling twice across the rotten leaves before springing back up immediately, growling. But the second one did not wait. It lunged in from the north, aiming for Kato's back. Exactly the right tactic, attacking the blind spot while the target was turned away. Its claws raked a long gash across Kato's shoulder. The very shoulder Bosco had bitten 4 weeks earlier, the wound still not fully healed. Kato roared. Not a roar of pain, but one of pure fury. He spun around and seized the second leopard with both hands. For one brief moment, I saw the strength still left in a silverback who had once led for 15 years. Kato lifted the leopard completely off the ground and hurled it away. The leopard flew through the air, slammed into a tree trunk, and dropped to the ground. It lay flattened for a few seconds before struggling back up, limping. The first leopard attacked again, this time going low, sinking its teeth into Kato's calf. Kato stomped downward, but the leopard held on, yanking backward. Kato lost his balance, one knee hitting the ground. Amara screamed behind him. Kato braced himself with his left hand against the earth, grabbed the leopard by the scruff with his right, clamped down hard, and tore it away from his leg. The leopard thrashed and clawed continuously at Kato's arm, but Kato did not let go. He drove the leopard down into the ground, pinning it beneath the full weight of his body, and then roared. A long, resonant roar that seemed to vibrate straight through the bones. The second leopard stood 10 meters away, watching. When Kato released the first one, the 2 leopards looked at him one last time, and then both retreated into the darkness. They did not come back. Kato remained standing there for another 10 minutes, blood running from his shoulder and calf, eyes scanning the darkness, both hands clenched. Once he was certain the danger had passed, he turned back toward Amara, sat down right beside her, and faced his back outward. The guarding posture I had seen him take thousands of times when he still led the troop. He was protecting again. Protecting once more. The next morning, Kato ate. A few stalks of wild celery broken from a nearby bush. Not much, but he ate. Amara sat beside him, nursing her infant, occasionally picking leaves from Kato's back as if nothing had changed. The wounds on Kato's shoulder and leg were still bleeding slightly, but he did not lick them, did not pay attention to them. Over the following days, Kato began to move, slowly, limping, but moving. He led Amara and the infant along the paths he knew by heart from 15 years of leadership, to fruiting bushes that even the larger troop might not have known, to small streams where the water still ran clear in the middle of the muddy, rainy season. I did not fool myself. A troop of 3 was too small to survive long term. Kato might live another 3 years, maybe 5 if he was lucky. Amara needed at least 1 more female to form a stable social group. The infant needed to grow strong enough before Kato no longer had the strength to protect it. I wrote in the report, Kato stood up. Not because he was no longer in pain. Not because he had forgotten 15 years taken from him in 3 minutes. He stood up because there was a 3-month-old infant gripping the fur on his arm, and a female sitting beside him, picking leaves from his back every afternoon. On the final morning before I left the station, I watched the 3 gorillas moving along the mountainside. Kato walked in front, slowly, his shoulder still carrying the scar from the night of the fight. Amara followed behind, the infant lying on her back, its eyes wide open as it looked up at the forest canopy. Morning mist curled around their legs. I did not know how long this small troop would survive. I did not know whether Kato had enough strength to make it through the next rainy season. But that morning, he was walking, not wandering aimlessly. He was leading, for a troop with only 2 followers, along a path only he knew. And that, perhaps, was enough.